few years ago, my older brother passed away. Shortly before his sudden death, he had moved into an off-the-grid cabin in a semi-abandoned logging village deep in the Maine woods. He bought the property from the previous owners for dirt cheap. His death was completely unexpected. He wasn't sick and never complained about his health. He was a cheerful guy who just wanted to live away from civilization. But the circumstances of his death were deeply disturbing. His body was found on a dirt road leading to the village. He was missing his left leg, and his face was frozen in a grotesque grimace of pure terror. The local authorities concluded he was the victim of a brutal bear attack. Even then, a worm of doubt crept into my soul. My brother never stepped foot in those woods without his hunting rifle. Yet no rifle was found near his body. I couldn't logically explain his bizarre death any other way. I buried my brother. As his only remaining relative, I inherited that cheap cabin. On one sunny Sunday, I decided to drive up to the village. The town had no name. It was officially listed in country records as condemned. There were no road signs, so I navigated using coordinates. I arrived around noon. It consisted of crumbling, rotten houses, pathways overgrown with weeds, dead gardens, and leaning fences. But the most overwhelming impression was the absolute crushing silence. There were no birds chirping, no wind rustling the leaves. The village consisted of 2 small blocks. The perimeter was enclosed by a massive wooden fence with only one entrance. The block where my brother's house stood was to the left of the gate. I decided to walk around the entire block first, inspecting this strange and gloomy area. Suddenly, I heard a sharp squeak. It sounded exactly like a metal saw scraping against a rusty pipe. The source was an open window in one of the neighboring houses. I saw a frayed curtain swaying slightly and realized why the sound was so unnerving. Besides my own footsteps and the rustling dry grass, it was the only sound in this entire place. I got this heavy sensation that someone was watching me from the shadows. After a short walk, I finally gathered the courage to inspect my brother's house. It was a 2-story cabin. On the first floor, right past the entryway, was the kitchen. On the dining table sat a plate of half-eaten roasted potatoes, giving off a savory aroma. I cautiously took a fork and took a small bite. The potatoes were piping hot. The very second I put the fork back down, a sound echoed from the hallway. A small metal ball, about an inch in diameter, bouncing down the wooden stairs from the second floor. It hit every single step before rolling across the floorboards and coming to a stop right under the chair. I pulled the chair back to pick it up, but I didn't find the ball. I inspected the bottom of the chair, but I didn't see the ball this time either. It had completely vanished. I started feeling deeply uneasy. I had absolutely zero desire to go up to the second floor to investigate. I decided that 15 minutes in this village was more than enough for me. I glanced down at my watch to check the time. It was already 1:30. It was impossible that I had been there for an hour and a half, but the hands on the clock showed exactly that time. Suddenly, a deafening stomping and crashing erupted from right above my head. It sounded as if 10 heavy men had simultaneously jumped out of their beds on the second floor. Pure blinding panic seized me. I sprinted out of the house. I threw a quick glance at the spot where I had parked my car. To my absolute horror, it had been moved. It was now parked completely outside the block, in the different part of the village. I was running away from that damn house, but something was already coming down the stairs to greet me. probably exactly the way it had greeted my brother. As I ran past the front of the house, I glanced back at the window and saw it. It had an unnaturally square face. Right in the middle was a tiny nose, and below it a gaping maw. There were no eyes on its head at all. I bolted toward the car like a bullet. As I jumped into the driver's seat, the creature stepped out of the front door. It looked like a deformed humanoid, missing its left arm, but with a grotesquely muscular right arm. This massive arm wasn't growing from the shoulder, but protruding horribly from its shoulder blade. I slammed on a gas pedal and sped past it. I was driving away in a state of absolute shock. After putting some distance between myself and the village, I checked my watch. It was 10 minutes to 4. Time was completely broken. At exact 4 o'clock, I pulled off the dirt road onto the main highway. I pulled over to the shoulder, opened the door, and fell to my knees in the grass, violently sick. I stared back in terror toward the turnoff leading to the village. Ever since that day, I only sleep with the lights on. I put the house up for sale the exact same day, asking for half the price my brother paid. I explicitly wrote that it required major renovations. A buyer appeared, a young pair of newlyweds wanting a secluded honeymoon. The price was so attractive that they gladly agreed. A month after the sale, I received tragic news. The young bride was brutally murdered out there. Her eyes had been completely scratched out, and her husband had lost his mind. The property was immediately seized by the state. Investigators came to my house, but I lied. I answered that I had only been there for a few minutes and knew nothing. Today, that entire area is some kind of restricted military or government facility, completely surrounded by barbed wire fences. People on the internet write that there is a massive magnetic anomaly zone there. On Google Earth satellite maps, that specific spot just shows an endless, dense forest. What is actually going on out there right now, I don't know, and I never want to know. One day, after a long day of wandering through the dense forest, a hunter was caught in the middle of the thicket by a stormy night. It had already gotten dark, freezing rain began to fall, and having no idea of his location, he decided to keep walking in one direction until he made it out of the woods. After several grueling hours of walking, he stumbled into a small clearing, in the middle of which stood a wooden cabin. Realizing he had no chance and could freeze to death, he decided to stay in the cabin for the night. The door was unlocked, and no one was inside. The hunter, exhausted to the bone, lay down on the single creaky bed. Looking around the dark cabin, the hunter was surprised to find that all the walls were decorated with several portraits painted in great, intricate detail. Without exception, all the pale faces in the portraits stared at him maliciously and with clear threat. The hunter felt extremely uncomfortable under their piercing gazes. Ignoring the faces in the paintings that glared at him with hatred, he turned to face the wooden wall, covered himself with his jacket, and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, he woke up to bright sunlight hitting his face. Looking around the bright room, he froze. He saw that there were absolutely no portraits on the walls in the cabin. There were only windows. I always thought the supernatural completely bypassed my family. I believed scary stories were just figments of active imaginations, until recently. A few weeks ago, I went to visit my dad. He lives in Columbus, Ohio now, while I stayed out on the West Coast. We hadn't seen each other in a year and a half, so we stayed up late catching up. We started reminiscing about the late 90s, back when our whole family lived in Portland, Oregon. There was one question that had always bothered me. My dad had everything in Portland, a beautiful 4-bedroom house, connections, a great life. But in 1999, he suddenly dropped everything and fled to Ohio. I never dared to ask why, assuming it was personal. But this time, being a grown man, I finally asked. I was not prepared for the answer he gave me. Here is what he told me. Back in those days, he was a long-haul trucker. That winter, he took a high-paying load deep into Montana. The winter was brutal. He delivered the cargo, unloaded, and headed back. But on the way home, the interstate was shut down due to massive snowdrifts and avalanches. He had to take a detour. It was a narrow, godforsaken state route cutting straight through a dense national forest. Dad had been driving on it for about 30 miles. There wasn't a soul around. No oncoming traffic, nobody in the rearview mirror. Just towering black trees and falling snow in the headlights. Dad was squinting at the road when he noticed a shape on the shoulder. At first he thought it was just a large snow-covered tree stump, but as he got closer, he realized it was a person. Who in their right mind wanders the woods in the blizzard, he thought. He hit the brakes, but the massive 18-wheeler slid on the ice for another 50 yards before coming to a halt. He looked in the mirror. The person was just standing there, unmoving. Dad rolled down the window, letting in the freezing wind, and yelled, "Hey buddy, hop in. I'll give you a ride. You gonna freeze." The figure turned slowly and began walking toward the truck at a leisurely pace. Dad said his instinct kicked in before his eyes did. Something was fundamentally wrong. The guy was dressed completely inappropriately for the weather. A gray hoodie, jeans, and a Converse sneakers. It was sub-zero outside. When the stranger stepped up to the cab window, the interior light hit his face. Dad's breath caught in his throat. The guy's eyes were inhuman. They were massive, 3 times larger than normal eyes, pitch black with no whites, and his mouth, his upper teeth looked like jagged needles protruding unnaturally over his lower lip. Dad instantly rolled up the window, slammed the truck into gear, and floored the gas pedal. The massive diesel engine roared, and the truck lurched forward. He checked the side mirror, expecting to see the figure shrinking in the distance, but the guy was running behind him. Dad accelerated the truck to 45 miles per hour on an icy road. It was suicide, but the creature kept pace. It was running with impossible speed, its movements a blur. Then, another figure burst out from the tree line. Then another. Soon, 5 of these things were chasing the multi-ton truck, running alongside the trailer in absolute silence. My dad was terrified. He was a tough, grown man, but he said tears were streaming down his face from pure animalistic dread. He pushed the truck to its limits, praying he wouldn't slide into the ditch. He doesn't even remember how he made it out of these woods. The creatures only fell back when the flickering lights of a rundown, isolated truck stop appeared ahead. Dad flew into a parking lot, killed the engine, and ran inside. He bought a coffee, downed it, and with a shaking voice told the owner everything. The old man just chuckled. He said it was highway hypnosis, playing tricks with the shadows and exhaustion. "Sleep it off in your cab, buddy. Your mind is just playing tricks on you. Dad paid for parking, locked the truck doors from the inside, and crawled into a sleeper cab in the back. He woke up a few hours later, needing to use the restroom. It was pitch black outside, and the blizzard has worsened. To see anything and make a run for the building, he climbed into a driver's seat, turned the ignition key, and flipped on the headlights. Then, he hit the windshield wipers to push away the thick layer of snow. The sweep of the wipers revealed a sight that made his heart stop. They were there. Standing in the glare of the high beams were the exact same creatures, but now there were at least 10 of them. They were lined up in a perfect semicircle right in front of the truck's grill, and all of them were staring directly at him. Their giant pitch-black eyes absorbed the light, reflecting nothing. Deadlocked eyes with the one standing in the center. From the corner of its mouth, dripping slowly down its cheek, was a thick trail of dark blood. Pure panic took over. Dad slammed his fist onto the steering wheel. The truck's massive air horn shattered the night silence. The deafening roar startled the creatures. They flinched and scattered chaotically, vanishing into the darkness of the storm. Dad didn't wait. He slammed it into gear and tore out of the gas station lot as fast as the truck would move. The most terrifying part, he said, was the rest of the drive. It was pitch dark, snow hammering the windshield, and absolutely nothing visible in the rear-view mirrors. He had no idea if they were running behind him again in the blind spots. He drove non-stop without blinking until he saw the city lights of Portland. After that run, my dad changed. He developed severe paranoia. He would wake up multiple times a night, just standing by the window staring outside. He was terrified that those things had followed the truck all the way to the city and figured out where we lived. Almost a year passed. It was New Year's Eve 1999. In the early evening, Dad stepped out onto the balcony of our third-floor apartment to smoke a cigarette. He looked down at the street and his blood ran cold. Standing directly under the yellow glow of the streetlight were them. 3 of them. They weren't moving. They just tilted their heads back, staring straight up at him with those massive, void-like eyes. Dad flew back inside, double-locked the balcony door, and drew every curtain in the house. He called a buddy of his and stayed on the phone with him until the sun came up, just to hear a human voice, just to feel like he wasn't alone. The very next day, he packed his bags, bought a one-way ticket, and flew to his relatives in Ohio. He sold the Portland house remotely a month later. He gave up his entire life just to be as far away from those woods as possible. Then my dad went silent, took a sip of his drink, and looked me dead in the eyes. "It's been only 20 years," he said quietly. "But you know what? Every time I drive on an empty highway at night, or just step out onto the balcony to smoke a cigarette, my chest tightens with this primal dread. I'm terrified that one day I'll look into the darkness and they'll be standing there again, that they finally found me." I forced my heavy eyes open and propped myself up on my elbows in the bed. The digital clock glowed with a crimson light in the dark, showing 3:23 a.m. Standing by my bed was my little daughter. "Do you want to crawl into bed with us and tell me about him?" I whispered, rubbing my eyes. "No, Daddy," she replied quietly. The strangeness of the situation made me wake up almost completely. The room was cold. I could barely make out the pale figure of my little girl in the darkness of the bedroom. "Why not, sweetie? It's just a bad dream," I said. "Because in my dream, when I told you about him, someone wearing mommy's skin woke up on the bed right next to you." For a moment, my heart dropped into my stomach. My breathing stopped. I froze, blood running cold with terror, unable to take my eyes off my daughter standing in the doorway. And then someone slowly rustled the blanket right behind my back. It was a Friday evening. I was working late in an empty office on the 14th floor. The building was absolutely dead, with only the low hum of the ventilation system breaking the silence. Outside, a massive rainstorm was raging. I was exhausted. I saved the last of my documents, turned off the monitor, and had just put on my jacket. At that exact moment, the silence was shattered by my cell phone ringing. There was no name on the screen, not even a string of digits, just the words "unknown caller." I let out a heavy sigh and accepted the call. "Hello?" I asked in a tired voice. "Hello, I need help, please. I'm begging you, help me." A man's voice blurted out. It was raged, broken, and full of tears. I rolled my eyes. Another prank call. "Look, if you have an actual emergency, call 911 or an ambulance. I can't help you," I said drily and hung up the phone. I shoved the phone into my pocket and walked toward the elevators. But less than 5 minutes later, the same unknown number rang again. "Now you're really gonna get it," I thought angrily and answered the call. "Hello?" I practically shouted. Surprisingly, there was silence on the other end. But then, in the background, I heard voices and muffled screams. My anger vanished instantly. My stomach dropped. Maybe I was wrong to yell at him. Clearly, he really was in some kind of trouble. "Hello?" I asked, softer this time. "Please." The guy's breathless voice came back. "All right," I said, leaning against the wall. "You have 5 minutes." "It all started 3 days ago," he began speaking rapidly. "I was asleep in my apartment. At exactly midnight, I was woken up by a call. Blocked number. At first, there was just white static, and then a hoarse, grating man's voice whispered, 'Your deepest wish for a precious price. What do you want?' I thought it was someone's sick joke. I looked at the screen. The call timer showed we had been talking for over 5 minutes, even though only 10 seconds had passed. I got annoyed. My computer had just died, and I decided to play along with this prankster. "All right," I said into the receiver. "I want the most powerful laptop in the world. How are we paying for it? Cash, or should I transfer some crypto?" The voice replied instantly. "A deepest wish for a precious price. A laptop for your soul. You have exactly 3 days." The call abruptly disconnected. I just scoffed in the dark. Yeah, whatever you say," I muttered, threw the phone on the nightstand, and went back to sleep. The guy on the line let out a heavy exhale. But in the morning, my doorbell rang. There was a black box sitting on my porch. Inside was a laptop. But how is that even possible? I never gave that voice my address. From that day forward, my life turned into a living hell. Things in my apartment started moving completely on their own. Constant rings at my doorbell, but when I looked through the peephole, no one was there. At night, dishes would shatter in the kitchen, and every single day, my phone would ring. Blocked number. I wouldn't pick it up, but that hoarse voice would whisper from the speaker, "Soon, very soon." And today, The third day arrived. The guy's voice broke into a quiet whimper. I woke up about 2 hours ago, completely tied to my bed. My ropes were biting into my wrists, but I wasn't alone. Sitting at the foot of my bed in the pitch darkness was something. It was completely black like a shadow, and it crawled up toward me. I could really feel the ice-cold edge of something sharp pressing slowly against my throat. A thin, freezing line of sting that made me realize one wrong breath and it would all be over. It leaned right into my ear and whispered, "Time is up. You will live till midnight. Call someone. Tell them everything. Pass the burden. Otherwise, your loved ones will die and you will die very slowly and painfully." Right now, I'm lying in my bed. I'm still tied up. "This creature," the guys whispered, "it's holding the phone to my ear right now. It forced me to dial a completely random string of numbers, and I got through to you. I fulfilled the condition. I told you this story. I passed the curse, and tonight at midnight, it will call you. I'm so sorry. Forgive me." The line went dead. He hung up. I stared blankly at my phone screen. Sick bastard. Played it perfectly. I was shaking a little bit, but I forced myself to laugh it off. I went down to the parking garage and got into my car. The entire drive home, I tried to push this nonsense out of my head. When I finally got to my apartment, I double-checked all the deadbolts. I took a shower, turned on every single light, and sat down in front of the TV. I kept convincing myself it was just an elaborate prank. Soon, pure exhaustion took over, and I passed out right on the couch to the mumbling of the news. I was violently jolted awake by a sharp vibration. My phone was buzzing aggressively on the glass coffee table. I snapped my eyes open. The TV was turned off. For some reason, all the lights in my apartment had gone out. The room was submerged in absolute darkness. Flashing on the display were the words, "Unknown caller." I threw a quick glance at the clock on the microwave. It read exactly 12 a.m. Midnight. My heart plummeted. With sweaty palms, I reached for the phone and pressed answer. White static word from the speaker, and then a hoarse, grating voice. "Your deepest wish for a precious prize. What do you want?" I jumped off the couch. I was shaking with animalistic terror. I remembered the guy from the office. "No," I screamed into the receiver. "No, I don't want anything from you. Go to hell!" A long pause hung on the line, just the static hissing, and then the voice let out a low chuckle. "A deepest wish for a price. You need nothing as you wish. Nothing for your soul. 3 days." The call disconnected. 2 days have passed since that moment. My apartment has turned into a nightmare. I hear footsteps at night. I see shadows. Yesterday, the massive bathroom mirror shattered into a million pieces. Today is the 3rd day. In just a few hours, midnight will strike. I'm sitting in the corner of my room, gripping a baseball bat. My hands are shaking. I'm losing my mind with fear. I want to live. I really, truly want to live. And now I know there is only one possible way to save myself. I'm sorry, but I just needed to share this story with someone. I'm taking out my cell phone right now. I'm dialing a random number. Who knows, maybe tonight my call will come through to you.